Good day, everyone. Welcome back. Today we're talking about connecting your introduction and conclusion. Now, the last couple days we've been talking about how to make your introduction really powerful. We've learned some new strategies. Instead of using the rhetorical question, we've learned several new strategies to make it more interesting and gripping. Now, today we're going to talk about conclusions. How do we wrap everything up? How do we make our conclusion and our last thoughts in our essay most impactful? So let's jump into it. Number one, I have a thought question for you. Why is it important to connect your introduction to your conclusion in some interesting way? Why should you connect all the thoughts that you started with and finish in the same interesting way? Take a moment. I want you to pause and answer that question. So as you were thinking, why was it important to connect your introduction to your conclusion? Did you come up with these ideas? Number one, it summarizes everything you have talked about in your essay. That's really important. You spent all this time working on your essay, communicating your ideas. It's important to summarize everything, to refresh in your reader's mind what you found most important. Number two, a good summary it revisits that interesting hook from your first paragraph. So you worked really hard to introduce your topic in an interesting way. You hooked the reader. Did you revisit that same hook in the conclusion? Did you tie it back to your introduction? Number three, a good summary leaves the reader thinking or wanting to take action after reading your essay. You don't want the reader to just go home and play video games. You want them to take action. You want them to believe what you have worked so hard to communicate. So make sure in your conclusion you tell the reader to take some sort of action or leave them thinking about your topic in an interesting way. So I want us to look at an introduction and the same conclusion that a student wrote in their essay. This is not a well-connected intro conclusion. The intro states, "The earth is being destroyed, and humans will die if they do not find another place to survive. Women, children, and the elderly are all withering away on this hot, overcrowded place we call the earth. We must try to find a new place to live, and Mars would be the perfect place to relocate." Now this is a great intro. But let's look at their conclusion and notice how it's not connected. It's a poor connection between intro and conclusion. Their conclusion states, "In conclusion, Mars would be the perfect place to relocate." So as you look at their intro and as you look at their conclusion, you'll notice that they are not connected. So now ask yourself this, why is this a bad connection between the intro and conclusion? Why is it such a poor connection? Well, let's consider it. Look at the red arrow first. This introduction is very interesting. It grabs the reader's attention. It also tells what the essay will be about. They use the hook technique of paint a picture of this dying earth. They describe, using the senses, what's happening on this burning, dying earth. But now let's look at the green arrow. This conclusion is boring, and it does not summarize the best parts of the essay. Also, another point is they didn't revisit the same hook. They didn't use paint a picture again in the conclusion in some new and interesting way. So this conclusion is very poor considering how strong the introduction is. Now let's ask ourselves, what are some ways to make your conclusion great? Instead of that boring one-sentence conclusion we just saw, how can I make my conclusion strong and great, just like my intro? Well, number one, think about reusing or revisiting your introduction or your hook in some new way. If you use the technique of paint a picture in the first paragraph of your essay, where you use the 5 senses to hook your reader, think about reusing the 5 senses and the paint a picture technique in a new way in the conclusion. If you used an anecdote, a personal story, at the beginning of your essay, think about using an anecdote again at the end of your essay. Number 2 here, summarize your main points from your essay. The reader just spent a lot of time reading your essay, but you need to revisit and re-summarize what were those main points from your essay. Make it fresh in the reader's mind. Number 3, urge or encourage the reader to act in some way. Don't just let them go play Fortnite or some sort of video game. Encourage them to go act. You want change in the world. You want them to do what you do and believe what you believe. So in your final paragraph, encourage them to do something. Last but not least, leave the reader with an interesting question or idea. Similar to number 3, don't let them go forward in life without doing something or changing in some way. So let's revisit this intro and this conclusion that the student wrote. It's the same intro about a dying earth where children, women, and elderly are withering away in the hot planet, and they're suggesting that we move and relocate to Mars. But now, let's look back at this new revised conclusion, and let's ask ourselves, is it better? Here's their conclusion. Instead of burning alive, now women and children live in peace and harmony. Instead of dying of thirst, now they splash in rivers and lakes. In conclusion, the Earth is no longer suitable for human life, but Mars would be the perfect place to relocate. So, now that you've read this more improved conclusion, the question becomes, how is this conclusion better? What changes did they make to the conclusion to make it more interesting and connect better to the introduction? So let's revisit it. They reused that hook technique from the first paragraph. In the first paragraph, they painted a picture with their words. They used the 5 senses, and so did they in this conclusion. Instead of burning alive, now women and children live in peace and harmony. Instead of dying of thirst, they splash in rivers and lakes. So they're painting a picture just like they did in the intro. That's a great connection. Number 2, they restate their main point or their claim that living on Mars would be much better than living on a dying Earth. So this is restating the conclusion, or the intro claim again. This is a much better connection between the two intro and conclusion. Well, thanks for joining us today. Here's the key that I want you to remember. So, always remember to connect your introduction and conclusion in an interesting way. Both need to summarize your essay's main points. You worked so hard in your essay, don't forget to conclude and end well. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next time.